Hello guys, hoy vamos a comprobar tu nivel de inglés con una práctica de listening. Y va a ser una práctica un poco controvertida porque va a tratar de eventos actuales. Today we're going to talk about the mass deportations that are happening in the US. So while I'm on a walk with my dogs, we're at the park, I'm going to talk to you guys in 90% English. El 90% de este video va a ser en inglés intermedio. Y tengo que decir que va a ser un poco retante para algunos de ustedes porque va a tener números, va a tener estadísticas, va a tener historias de personas que conozco. Vamos a comprobar tu nivel de inglés. Quédense hasta el final y cuéntenme abajo cuánto consiguen entender. Let's go. I can't believe that this is happening in 2025. Mass deportations, families are being detained and sent back to their countries. Children are in cages. And I'm from Seattle, which is a sanctuary city. And even then, ICE is going into schools, going into churches, going into community centers to detain people and deport them. It's heartbreaking what's happening. And it especially hits home for me because this is something that directly affects my family. My grandparents are from Mexico, and they moved to the US many years ago in search of better opportunities. My grandpa, actually, they moved to the US when it was a lot easier to cross the border, so they just drove across the border. They didn't have any documentation, but it wasn't that hard in those days to cross the border. Nowadays, the situation is a lot different. Then they moved up to Washington State. Of course, that's where I was born. And they were working in strawberry fields. Well, my grandfather was working in construction and picking strawberries. Actually, today, my grandpa has the marks of his story. He still has the manchas, the spots on his hands from the pesticides of the agricultural fields, from being in the sun all day picking strawberries. And he was also working in construction. My grandma was a seamstress, and she also raised my father and my aunts. My grandparents came to the US looking for a better future for us, for their children and for their grandchildren, and I thank them so much. The craziest thing is that my grandpa, because he had experience working in construction, he actually built the house, our family house, with his own two hands. Then he built a house next door with his own two hands for my aunts once she had kids. And then he built another house right next door for my other aunt for when she had her family. So he worked so hard to create this life full of opportunities, and we thank their sacrifice every single day. They had to learn English. Their English, even until today, isn't perfect, but they were able to make a life in the US. Eventually, they decided that they wanted to move back to Mexico because, they have a lot of love for their home country. And the idea wasn't to live in the US forever, but to make sure that we had better opportunities and that we could have a good, safe life, which I think is the most important part. So eventually they moved down to Mexico, to Baja California, and they actually built the house that they live in today, un ranchito. They built a ranch. My grandpa with his own two hands. Of course, he has friends who are also in construction and helped him. But he worked so hard for so many years, saving money for the materials and also just the labor of doing that on his own. So I'm so proud of him, and my family history gives me so much strength today, to keep working towards creating better opportunities for me and also for my students. That's my mission today, is to help Latinos through learning English build a better and more safe and secure future for themselves and for the ones that they love. And today a lot of Latinos are scared to live in the US. They're ashamed of their heritage, of their roots, of their culture, even of their language, of their accent. And that to me is shameful, but for Americans to think that way. Because I think that the diversity is one of the greatest things that the US has, and it's one of our biggest assets. It's one of the most beautiful things about the country. And the fact that there's so much hatred and racism towards Latinos, it's really heartbreaking. And to me, that's really sad because at the end of the day, the US is a country built on dreams, and the American dream is just that, about creating opportunities and creating a better future and a safe future for ourselves. And let's be honest, the US was built on immigrant labor, and today the country still sustains itself on immigrant labor. So this whole mass deportation scheme is hypocritical in my opinion. But it's not just about the emotional part and how inhumane this whole thing is. Let's talk about statistics. I have a few articles here and I'm going to read the statistics directly from real sources. Here are the facts. Trump has set a quota to arrest and detain and deport 3,000 people per day. Nationally, at least 11,700 people with no criminal record have been detained. That's as of June 29th, which is the day that I'm recording this video. Some Pew research shows that 23% of US adults worry that someone they know or love will be deported. Also, 47% of Latinos report being afraid of deportation. That's compared to only 43% of all other nationalities. So it's higher for Latinos. And this, I think, is one of the most sad parts. Over 56,000 people are in ICE detention as of June 15th, 2025, and 71% have no criminal convictions. So imagine living in that fear every day. And I know many of you guys watching do live in that fear every day. And it makes me so sad to think that a lot of my students and a lot of the people that are a part of my community who are just honest, hardworking people trying to make a better future for themselves are living in fear. And it's crazy to me because in 2025, the administration is calling this the largest deportation program in history. If you know anything about US history, you know this has happened multiple times. Well, in 2025, this is the largest. People are being taken from sanctuary cities where they're supposed to be safe, like Seattle, New York, and Los Angeles. They're even planning on expanding detention centers in places like Florida. They call it Alligator Alcatraz, to have more space to detain even more people because the 60,000 people that are currently in detention isn't enough. We're talking about families, we're talking about children with futures in cages and people with no criminal record. And this isn't just about politics, this is about human rights. Veterans, people who have served and built this country, breastfeeding mothers, children are being detained and put into detention centers. And what frustrates me so much about this is all the hypocrisy from the administration. I mean, can we talk about the fact that the president's wife is also an immigrant, first-generation immigrant? So why is it that some immigrants are allowed to stay and others are being targeted? That, to me, is what hurts the most. And this is the thing, as hard as they try to erase our roots in the US, and they try to erase the influence, it's never gonna happen. At this point, nearly 50% of the population, let me make sure that's correct actually. I read this a few years ago, so I wanna make sure it's correct. Let me ask ChatGPT. Hey ChatGPT, a few years ago I read that nearly 50% of the population by 2030 or 2050 will have Hispanic roots. Can you give me the correct statistic here? By 2050, nearly a quarter or 25% of the population will have Hispanic roots. So as much as they try to erase us, it's never gonna happen. And to all the people out there who are living with fear, I just want you to know that you belong. You belong, and most of us, most Americans, US citizens, don't want you to be deported. This is a hate program. Yeah, this is just racism. This is systemic racism that has existed since the beginning of US history. You can look back history, but I don't think it's necessary because we all know that racism is a huge issue in the US. I mean, at this point, I'm third generation Mexican American, so I'm like a US citizen all the way. I mean, because my last name is Martinez doesn't mean anything, but I've even experienced comments. This is something I've shared in past videos. But one of my teachers in elementary school, actually, he was my algebra teacher in 5th grade. He told me, you know, you're smart for being Mexican. And at that point I was like 11. So I didn't understand what it meant to be like Mexican or American. I was just existing. And once he told me that, I realized, hold on, so people look at me different because of my appearance and because of my last name. And I think this is so important that we're aware of as a society. Have you ever noticed that news outlets will say things like Black man X or Latino man did this crime, did X crime, because they're actually utilizing races so that in our mind, subconsciously, we're thinking, okay, Hispanic people are committing X crimes, so then I can't trust them. And that is how they pit us against each other. They are trying to erase us. And it's not going to happen because we will persist. We are nearly a quarter of the population. So as much as they try to have these programs and they're hurting people based on their nationality, which is inhumane. If you want to make a life for yourself in the US, the most important thing you have is your voice, and you need to be able to communicate your ideas and defend yourself in English against authorities. A lot of my family to this day don't speak English, and they've been living in the US for decades. I have students, one of my students who's been studying with me the longest, and one of my students who's right now fearful. Although he just recently got his residency, he is still in fear of deportation. He's been living in the US for nearly 30 years, and he only recently started learning English. I wanted to add something here because I just finished a class with this very student who's also a small business owner. He owns a taxi company, and he actually had recently had a situation with ICE because he has a lot of Latino workers, and one of his workers was actually followed by the police, by ICE, by 3 cars, and he was actually detained this week, well, just yesterday. And so the cop actually took out a list of people, and he said, yeah, you're on this list. And the guy asked, why me though? And he said, well, you just had bad luck today. So they're just playing with people's lives, and in such a careless way. And you know, the worst part about this is that this man actually had a son who worked in the Navy. He served our country, he served the country, yet he was still detained and deported even after having a son who contributed so much to society. So I just wanted to add this story here because this is something that's very relevant. It's something that obviously is happening every day, and it's affecting people that it shouldn't be affecting. People who are contributing to making the US a better society. It's so important for you guys to keep learning English, to keep studying, to know your rights, because at the end of the day, nobody can take that knowledge from you. And knowledge is power. We will resist, we will persist, and they are not going to be able to erase us or erase our history or erase our future. So please take care of yourselves out there. I know a lot of you guys are Latinos living in the US, and just know that pertenecen. La mayoría de nosotros no queremos que ustedes se vayan, que se borren, y muchos de nosotros somos fruto de su labor. Así que yo solo agradezco a todos los latinos que están ahí trabajando tan duro por levantarse y además levantar el país. So guys, a mí me gustaría conocer su opinión sobre este tema. ¿Cuál ha sido su experiencia? ¿Qué opinan ustedes? Cuéntenme abajo en los comentarios. Además, cuéntame cuánto has podido entender de este video. Si les gustó este video, ve a ver este de aquí porque estoy segura que les va a encantar. See you next Thursday.